Welcome to the Off Leash Podcast with Dr. Pete. I am your co-host, Molly Van Rankin, and we are so glad that you joined us for today's show. Remember, we're not here to say what you want us to say. We're here to be an advocate for your pet, which is where we go into our first topic of the day. We asked you guys on email any more questions for Dr. Pete, and they just keep rolling in.
You know, these are fun for me because, about 25 years of my life, I had a talk show on Saturday morning, so I go in and do that. And you just get a few comments every once, like, you always answer those questions. Doesn't look like you're looking up anything. Well, I'd auditioned for that job for a long time.
Many years.
Yeah, not the talk show part, but being a veterinarian. So once you've crossed all this ground over and over and over and over again, you recognize the landscape.
Mm-hmm. And you're pretty good at answering questions on the spot without having much pre-thought into it.
Without looking it up.
Without looking at Dr. Google.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready for the first one?
Yes.
First question is from Allison A. Love the podcast. I am wondering what Dr. Pete thinks about holistic forms of tick prevention, like herbal supplements or sprays. I'm looking for something to have a second method of protection because they are so bad this year.
Okay. If you're looking for something to repel them, if I was going to try to repel ticks, let's just put it this way. The very first thing I would use would make sure I use an asoxylator, okay?
And what is that?
Asoxylators are like Brevecto.
Okay, so I give Simparica Trio.
Simparica Trio, Cordilio, Brevecto. I mean, just...
Real drugs for real problems.
Real drugs for real bugs, that's right. And so I would use that originally, and I'm going to tell you why. Mostly is because once they get on these dogs, they don't have much time to suck blood and then regurgitate it back into the dog. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to prevent the tick-borne diseases, Ehrlichia anaplasmosis, Lyme disease, even this red meat allergy we get from the Lone Star tick. So what we're trying to do, we're doing our damnedest to go ahead and prevent these diseases from occurring. Sometimes when you use a holistic thing, the tick may be on for 3 or 4 days. That may be enough time to actually transmit anaplasmosis, Ehrlichia, Lyme disease, and that sort of thing. So time is of the essence.
And Lyme disease is life-lasting.
Well, no, I mean, if you recognize it and to diagnose it and you treat them for doxycycline, most people, once their dog's had once it's had Lyme disease, they're pretty serious about preventing it in the past. And most of the histories include, we just did it during the warm months of the year. And quite frankly, ticks are always usually around or want to be around when it's cold and damp out. So that's March and April. And then the other months that you're going to get those things is going to be October, November. And so the ticks can crawl up on plant material, and stay there for all day because it's overcast and damp, and so you're not going to have any problems. And so using holistic things. Now, if you want to use a holistic thing, knock yourself out, but have a backup plan. Excuse me. It's like applying for college. You got a backup school you want to go to. So
I have a separate question from this.
This is my backup school, but we have to make sure that they are not allowed to drink blood very long. We have to get them off in a very timely fashion.
Separate question. Can you take how you can take a sheet and drag it across your yard and it picks up all the ticks?
It's called a tick drag, yeah.
So if you take a sheet and you drag it across your yard and say you find 200 ticks on the blanket, mm-hmm. Could you burn the blanket and it would get rid of the tick problem? Or
No. The ticks only get on it because what they see is they see motion. I don't know if you're aware of this, but ticks are blind.
They hop onto.
They reach out when they see movement or when they sense movement, and so that's why they do that. And if you're doing a tick drag, if you ever talk to anybody who's on a tick drag, they drag they drag the white sheet and they get nothing. They drag it again, they get nothing. They drag it again, they get 15. So usually they got 15 because they dragged it over an area that somebody had walked through, a deer or a dog or a person, and there's that the pheromones from that individual, mm-hmm. and so they know, somebody's been by here before. There's a good chance he'll come by here again. If you're walking through the woods, all of a sudden you come to a road. Well, I guess if you sit by the side of the road, there's probably somebody going to come by again. So you can do the tick drags, and they're fairly successful, and they're fairly successful if you do it someplace where a deer is bedded down.
Well, what do you do if you drag it and then you get all these ticks? Do you burn them?
No, well,
They won't kill them?
no. I mean, you can get rid of the ticks. You can dump them in alcohol or something like that if you want, and that's fine. The thing is,
Burn them.
with fleas, when we get those in the house, we can get rid of them. Ticks, it's really hard to get rid of them when you get them in a facility or in an area. And that's what people tell me all the time when they sprayed. And it's nice that they sprayed. The only thing is, I always have some problems when somebody says we sprayed, because all of a sudden now they think they've got this big dome over their house, and their dog or themselves, they're not going to get. They're not going to get. Yeah, they're not going to get Lyme or leishmaniasis. They think no. You know, you spray it, and then all of a sudden, 4 days later, you get 4 inches of rain or something like that. And most of your stuff is flat gone. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to poison. You have to booby trap where they're going to eat, which is
right.
I hate to say poison, but that's really what happens. And you know, and these things we use now, these isoxazolines, I mean, they're really good. They get fleas, they get ticks, they get ear mites. I just did a little presentation yesterday, and I asked the crowd, okay, do they kill mosquitoes when a mosquito bites a dog? And most people said no. And it's like, no, that's not the answer. Yes is the answer. How about biting flies? Yes, it kills biting flies. How about chiggers? Yes, it kills chiggers. How about scabies? Yes, it kills scabies.
Kills everything.
Yeah. How about Demodex? Yes, it kills Demodex.
More like, what doesn't it kill?
It doesn't kill your dog, and if it's an insect, it's going to kill an insect.
Okay.
If it's a biting insect, a dog, something that's going to feed on that dog.
Okay. Good to know. You ready for the next question?
Sure.
This is from Jenny R. Our 74-pound English lab has a hygroma. What is a hygroma?
Hygroma is like a bed sore on the elbows, usually.
Okay.
And
on her left elbow.
Yeah.
We have pads and cut up long socks to cover her elbows when it gets red and angry. Any suggestions to help manage it and avoid the crime scene mess it makes when it busts open? We will get her to the vet if it opens up for antibiotics and red light therapy for skin healing.
Yeah. You know, mostly I use something called Kerasolv, Kerasolv. That works actually pretty good on hygromas. And this is only on one elbow because this dog probably wants to, you know, it's like people, they sleep on one side.
I want to look this up. Is it like what our dogs have where they lay in their crate? And
well, there's a little scab right on the elbow. It's like a bed sore. And they can be on both sides. And then some of them get infected. And I hardly ever see tumors in them or anything, but they just get angry. And then the dog licks at it. And then they get more angry. And then they lay on it again. It gets even more upset, more angry.
Oh, they have these hygroma elbow protectors for dogs that you can buy online.
Yeah, they probably do, yeah. But I've always used, and you can use that on everybody, you can probably use Kerasolv.
Okay. Would you wrap it in the Kerasolv and then put this on?
Yeah, put the Kerasolv on and put that on. I've actually ever seen those before. So
they actually have braces for elbow dysplasia too.
Do they really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. How about that?
I just looked up hygroma.
Everything's on Amazon.
Dog.
Everything's
I know,
on
everything.
Amazon now. Yeah.
I just placed an Amazon order the other day. I did not add this to my cart though.
I'm glad you didn't. But anyway, it tends to be, hygromas tend to be bigger in fat dogs. So you'll see that. So you'll see that if somebody's kind of chubby and they're bedridden, they have pretty damn good sized bed sores. Because
some of these look like scabs and some of them look like zits online.
No. Oh yeah, this one is that's actually some sort of fluid-filled cyst on the back of the elbow. That's a bursitis.
That's not a hygroma.
That's bursitis. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I think the red light therapy would work pretty well.
Yeah, you've been around your mother too much.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, it works.
Okay.
I red light my dogs.
Whatever.
You and the holistic.
Yeah. Well, I'm all for holistic stuff when it works.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I've used Kerasolv, and it works definitely more than half the time. So I'm appreciative of that. And if we want to add something else on, if you want to use that Kerasolv and then you want to use red light stuff, knock yourself out. Dog gets better. Give the red light stuff the credit and poo-poo the Kerasolv. I don't care, but as long as it gets better, that's all I'm interested in. Did it get better? Did it get better?
Right. Ready for the next question?
Sure.
This is from Cindy M. My question is, once a dog has an elevated liver from blood work and you put them on Denamarin or whatever, do they need to be on this for the rest of their life or simply for a while and retest? He has no symptoms currently and has been on Denamarin and others for a while. He will be 11 in November.
Okay. How high did she say the ALT was? The liver
It
enzyme?
did
She
not
didn't really
say.
Yeah, that's always kind
She
of
just said
interesting.
has elevated liver from blood work.
Okay. So there's two kinds of liver enzymes. Well, there's actually three. ALK-phos, which is be ALK, and then there's ALT, which is the transaminase that we see strictly coming from livers. And then there's AST, which we don't use very much. But ALT is a leakage enzyme, so you have a hepatocyte or liver cell and it's inflamed, so it's leaking. It's leaking,
Yeah.
It's leaking that transaminase. So the liver's unhappy about something. Now, the denamarin and ursidiol or milk thistle, SAMI, whatever, those are all protectants. They will help that dog to the extent that if the dog has an injury, a liver injury,
Right.
then the dog will heal the liver injury, and the SAMI and ursidiol will protect it while that's happening. Okay? Mm-hmm. So it's like, if you lived, I don't know if we're getting rain today, we may be getting rain today. If we are, what are we going to use? An umbrella. And that's what denamarin and ursidiol, they're umbrellas. They're a protectant until it gets healed. Are they actually a medicine that says, okay, the dog has to heal themselves? I mean, it's like you get a cut on your arm. Well, your body has to heal that. But we might put misotracin on that while it's healing so it doesn't get infected. I'm not going to put misotracin on it. I'll probably use something, mupircin or something like that.
Okay.
Because I love mupircin. Mupircin's a really good topical antibiotic for dogs and people, all that sort of stuff. But anyway, that's what that is. That is a protectant while the body heals the liver issues. Now, if you've got copper in there and that's what's causing that, then it's not going to get any better with denamarin or ursidiol.
Right.
Yeah, now you got to figure out how to either get that copper out quick or allow it to get out by not replacing it with any new copper, which you're aware of. Yeah.
So by the time that you take the dog off the denamarin, is it after you retest, or do you just do it up to a certain point and go, okay, let's take them off and let's retest in a little bit?
Those dogs, if they've had long-standing things,
Those dogs 11, so obviously.
Well, how long's it been going on? That's the question. When did they discover it? And that's what we see. We see somebody comes in and they say, well, your ALT is like 144. Well, normal's up to 125. Well, it's pretty close to normal. We'll just not do anything. Okay, well, don't do anything. It's fine. Probably not fine, but it's fine. So they put them on. Now I come in, it's 154 now. So they say, well, let's put them on denamarin and SAMI. Okay, we do that. Denamarin, SAMI, milk thistle, ursidiol. They do all this stuff. Come back in again. Now it's 175. Well, that could be because copper's continuing to accumulate, and we're having.
Yeah.
We're having
you need to fix it from the start of the problem, not just treat the symptoms that are going on.
You got to figure out what you got going on there and how you're going to take care of it. And is that, are these dogs going to be on this stuff, for a long, long time? Whatever, I don't know. I mean, lots of times, if they're predisposed to it, having them on those drugs probably isn't a bad idea, especially at 11. It's kind of like when if you get to be 65 and you're going to have some form of life or health insurance at that point,
right? To
protect yourself, okay? And so really, that's what that is kind of health insurance for the dog's liver, health insurance. But it ain't going to make it better. It ain't going to make it better. Health insurance ain't going to make you better. It may allow you to hire a doctor to make you better,
right?
But in the end, it doesn't really do it itself. And so that's the thing we got to remember, that these high LTs and really as veterinarians, I've done this almost long enough now to, like, when something's a little bit high like that, I'm like, we need to do something.
Something's not. Something's awry.
We need to figure out what this is. Let's ultrasound the liver. Let's see whether the albumin's right or not. Are we losing weight? It's all these things put together to decide whether we got a problem. That's what was the one thing with our dog, Cookie. She got elevated liver enzymes. We didn't realize they were elevated until we noticed that she'd lost a little weight. Then we figured out she'd lost weight. Now her liver enzymes are elevated. She probably had it for a long time.
Yeah.
I kicked myself in the rear end, but she was only 6 years old. I didn't suspicion that we were having problems with her, because I go out and mow the lawn. She'd run up and down the fence, barking at the mower and everything. I figured, she's all right.
Yeah.
No, idiot, veterinarian.
Dogs are tough.
Yeah, dogs are tough. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Good thing about them, the bad thing about them.
You ready for our next question?
Sure.
This is from Carla T. I have a 4-month-old puppy that has tested positive for inheriting one bad copy of the copper toxicosis gene ATP7B.
Yep.
I lost another dog to this disease at only 7 years old right before Christmas of last year. He also had one bad copy of this gene. I'm already feeding Voyager to this puppy, the wholesome ocean pollock, being mindful of treats, and reading labels on everything. What else can you recommend that I do to prevent this disease from occurring?
You're doing it all. Short of going to church, everything's being done exactly the way it should be done. So what I do is I'd have maybe a little bit of blood work done every year or every 6 months, whatever makes you feel comfortable. I think about people every once in a while, and they're concerned about stuff. And so when I have people that are really super vigilant about stuff, then I may have them check blood work every 6 months, and then you do the blood work, and they go back and sleep like a baby for 4 or 5 months, and then they don't sleep like a baby for 4 or 5 months. You do more blood work. So a lot of this I'm doing. I'm doing all of it for the dog, but occasionally I'm throwing the client in on the equation at the same time, understanding that they're paranoid about this. And I don't blame them for being paranoid. I don't hold a lot of solace in this genetic phenotyping stuff, because here's the situation here. If this dog hadn't had that gene, then she would have said, well, I don't have to worry about this. No,
right.
No, you do have to worry about this. This is helpful sometimes, but it's not 100% effective. So you just can't, if you were born and somebody sent blood work on you, so you're never going to get cancer. And you'd say, well, screw the mammograms when I'm, 40 or 50 years old.
Right.
I'm not going to do those, because when I was little, they told me I wouldn't ever get cancer. Oh, no. That's how people die. I read something the other day about a woman had stage. In fact, I think she just passed, and she didn't get anything done because she was afraid of the radiation, of having the mammogram. Well, my gosh, it's not like she worked in a dental office or a radiology place where that stuff was all over the place. I get it then, but you aren't with a little bit of radiology you're going to have from having a mammogram.
Once every.
Yeah. Some doctor should have sat this woman down and said, listen, risk, reward, a lot more risk,
Some people are going to die on those hills.
Yeah. Well, and that's the problem with the internet, is everybody reads all this stuff on the internet. Well, this is dangerous. That's dangerous. This is dangerous.
Propaganda.
I just got done going on a river cruise. I could have fallen overboard and drowned. I didn't think much about it, but could have happened. Did I lay awake at night thinking, boy, I sure hope my wife doesn't push me off the boat? Because
that's a pretty high possibility.
Yeah, I know. She thought about it. But I just held on to the rails when I was up on the top of the boat. So I was probably good. But was there a chance that she would have done that? Not really. I think there's a lot of cameras around that boat, so I don't know that she'd ever done that and got away with it. But some of my friends would have said I had it coming, but who knows? And by the way, we were on the Rhine River, man. That thing moves along. That's a lot of current to that.
Yeah.
I thought this was, and they say it was a peaceful riverboat cruise. Well,
some of that current
cruise,
rips.
Yeah, the cruise was quiet. It was a quiet boat and everything. But man, that river was moving. Moving.
Oh,
God,
yeah.
We had a good time doing that.
Good.
Yep. But if we were in Europe, quite frankly, they don't have the same sort of problems we do with copper, because
they don't have the same regulations.
Well, they put a limit as to how much you can put in. Here it's whatever you want to put in. You want to put a bag in, you want to put a pallet in, you want to put a dump truck in, knock yourself out. That's a problem.
Yep. Exactly. All right. Ready for the next and final question?
Sure.
This is from Anita. Hi, my name is Anita, and my dog Nona is recently diagnosed with copper storage disease. We found it by accident with blood work done and an annual checkup. I say by accident because she didn't have any symptoms, just an extremely high liver value. I assume ALT. A biopsy confirmed the disease, but also revealed no scarring. The specialist put her on medication and a prescription diet. She absolutely refuses to eat the prescription food, and when I asked him about Voyager, he said he didn't know about it. I bought a bag of your food, and my dog is more than willing to eat it again. My question about the ingredients, specifically the organ meat. I was under the impression that organ meat is very high in copper. How is this if your food is low copper and there's organ being used in the recipe?
Okay, well, here's how
is it safe for my dog?
Here's how this kind of works. And we pick chickens because they don't live very long. So the shorter your lifespan, the less likely you are to to store copper in there.
Because the longer the lifespan, it absorbs more copper into the liver.
Yeah, but listen, my dear, your concerns are very well founded because we're starting to see a little bit of difference in how much copper's in chicken byproduct meal, and so we have to adjust our diets a little bit each time. So what we're trying to do, we're supposed to make this 7.3 number. So
as a minimum for AFCO standards.
So our goal is to have 7.31.
But honestly, if we didn't have the copper in the organ meat, would we even make that standard?
If we didn't, to a certain extent, if we just use chicken meal, we wouldn't make the AFCO diet. So we have to have chicken byproduct meal. So we have to have something
that organ meat, that has a little bit of copper just to make that minimum.
It's kind of like making chocolate chip cookies. How much sugar are we going to put in here? And then and some people complain, well, these cookies are too rich. They got too much. I guess we're going back to the Three Bears thing. This porridge is too cold. This porridge is too hot. So, and as far as the Three Bears and the porridge thing is, we own the stove, so we're determining how hot the porridge is going to be, and that's what we do. So I'd have to tell this person, this client of ours, that we check every batch as it comes in, and we may adjust how much of that chicken byproduct meal we put in every once in a while, because if we think it's starting to creep up a little bit, then we may add less of it. If it's starting to creep down a little bit, then we'll add a little more of it. But that's exactly right. And that's one of the reasons, if you look at our diets, we don't use much beef in there, because beef byproduct meal, and those cattle live to be 2 or 3 years old before they go to slaughter. And that's a real problem with cattle. And in fact,
because it absorbs a lot of the copper.
Yeah. And if you got a dairy cow and they might live to be 8 or 9 or 10 years old, while they're milking and stuff. And then if it's beef byproduct meal and it comes from a dairy cow, there may be a ton of that in there. We just got done doing something. We looked at somebody. I don't know if I want to tell this story or not, but we saw a diet that had beef heart, and it had beef liver, and it had beef kidney, and it had beef tripe, which is intestinal tract.
Stomach, liner.
So we called the manufacturer, and I'm not going to tell you who this is. We called the manufacturer and said, how much copper you got in this diet? We're looking at this diet, and gave them the lot number and everything, and they're like, oh, that diet, 12.5. And I told Ben, the guy in the office here, I said, I'm going to call bullshit on these people.
Didn't you test it?
Yeah, I tested it. So I thought it was clever of them. They should have said 12.57, because then I might have actually, I wouldn't have believed it. I knew what I knew.
Yeah.
And so that's always the problem. If somebody is in this business, we can sniff the bullshitters out. And these people were, they must have been sitting in BS up to their neck, because we ran it and it was almost 60. Yeah, so it wasn't 7. It wasn't 12.5. It wasn't 12, and it wasn't 13.
Wait. Was this a freeze-dried food?
Yeah, this was a freeze-dried food.
Oh, I know which one it is. Okay.
Yeah. So I told Ben, I said, let's just send this in. This costs us money to do that.
The cigarettes of dog food.
Yeah. The cigarettes of dog food. That's right. And is
it the case with most freeze-dried?
No, not necessarily. Depends. You can make these freeze-dried however you want to make them, but the problem here is if you make this kind of diet, and let's say you were thinking, I really love my dog and I want to put a topper on it with this on it, and you got a dog food that's already 25 or 30 parts per million, and then you go ahead and put this in, and this is 60 parts per million, and then your dog has copper storage disease, and then you come see me, and I don't hold any punches. I tell you, well, listen, sweetheart, you screwed up, and you just picked the wrong food to begin with, then you picked the wrong topper really to begin with, and so. And I wouldn't stand there and say, well, this is all your fault, because you have no way of knowing that there's this much stuff in there.
Yeah, unless you tested it. Because obviously if you called the company, you'd think, I'm getting a dog food with low amounts of copper. This is safe. This is...
Right. And I looked at this bag of food and I couldn't find skull and crossbones on it anyplace. So, I mean, that was and that's why I'm not telling you who owned this dog food company, because I don't want to get sued. And but I'll tell you, it's there. And so... there's a lot of liars in the world, and I think most of us are aware of that. Maybe if you're less than 3 years of age, you're not aware of this, but there's a lot of liars. And so liars make dog food. liars make cookies, liars make peanut butter, there's a lot of liars in the food industry. There's a lot of really ethical people also, but this is, and I've told you this before, this is the thing that really pees me off, is that they refer to in their literature as like, well, pet parents, and I want to call them, I'm not going to call them, but I want to call them and say, listen, you've lost your right to refer to people as pet parents.
Because you're not treating them like they're
you're
pet
not treating them.
parents.
You are putting crap in there and then saying, oh, you're a pet parent. What's that called? Being,
Cognitive dissonance?
No, I don't know what it is, but it's you're sort of patronizing. It's patronizing.
Yeah.
It's patronizing to refer to somebody as a pet parent and then give them, yeah. Well, it's so nice of you to give your dog these windmill cookies, but we put cyanide in them, but it was really nice of you to do that. Now they don't have a dog. And listen, once these people, and some of these people have these dogs that are really smart, and they back up and they get all the way through this and they figure out how all this happened. And then they want to go out and buy a handgun and
raise hell.
And raise hell, that's right. And I get why they're mad. And I get why they should be mad. And because somebody had the person on the front desk say 12.5, not between 12 and 15 or not between 15 and 30. They told them to say 12.5, and it was almost 60 parts per million.
That's unfortunate.
Big mistake, yeah. And the people, the dog's innocent. The dog didn't have this coming. It was a nice dog. I love my dogs. You love your dogs. Everybody in our place loves their dogs. And when somebody would do that to their dog, I mean, it really, people sometimes go off the deep end with this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but
I know you kind of went off the deep end when it happened to our dog.
Yeah, I was mad. Anyway,
you're pissed.
I was pissed. That's right. But in regards to your question, we have to use a little chicken byproduct meal to get enough copper to suit the AFCO people. But it's all pretty much natural copper that's in there. But some of these byproduct meals can have just a boatload of stuff. Now what we do is we'll just buy everything, check to see what the copper is, and then we'll kind of reverse engineer it to get the
make sure that we have enough
to make sure what we're looking for.
Exactly.
Yeah. At home you set the oven for 350, and that's kind of what we're setting the oven for, about 160, but we're sitting actually 7.3 is where we're setting the oven, and then we set the oven and it goes to there. That's the oven. That's pretty simple. Making dog food is a lot more difficult. And by the way, I don't know that we ever hardly talk about this. We put a little bit of extra. We assume
zinc.
We put extra zinc in there. We assume you might do something foolish.
Do a dog topper.
And do the dog topper. So if you put the dog topper on, then we got some extra zinc in there. So it may interfere with the uptake of that if you're feeding our food. That doesn't mean you can feed a topper made by a liar. You can't do that. You can't feed the topper made by the liar. But if you did, we've got you covered, kind of.
Yeah.
A little bit.
So moral of the story is, even if you call the company and you ask for the number, validate. Say, okay, let me ask you this. If someone was this passionate about it, which I guarantee that there are people that are this passionate about it, but say that they call their dog food company, they get back to them and they say, 9 parts per million of copper in that dog food bag. And they want to send their food in. If they want to take that liberty upon themselves to send it in, where would they send it to?
Well, we send it to a place called, I don't know if I want to say that either, but we send it.
Could an individual do it?
Yeah, you can send it to probably you take it to your veterinarian's office and have he or she do that. Send it in and find out. Tell them you want to just know how much copper's in that diet, okay?
Okay.
And then if it comes back like 50 or 60 or 70, then you get what's called a lawyer, and you start what's called a class action suit. And then you make a life interesting for them. But the problem is you're going to have a hard time doing that. And believe me, they don't, the last thing they want to do is read in the Wall Street Journal about how they're being sued. They got a big class action suit going against them because sometimes they're part of a bigger entity. And so this is, and I talk to people right now that I talked to 2 or 3 years ago, and they're still hot about it.
Oh, I believe it.
They're still hot about it. And
I believe it.
They'd like to see it. And quite frankly, these are the same sort of people that sometimes don't feel bad when that guy got shot in the back, that with United Healthcare. And I don't know that he ever did anything so nefarious he deserved to be shot in the back. I don't think he did. I think he was part of an entity or a group of people, and there was a culture there. And he was part of the culture. He may not even made the culture, but he's part of the culture. And so, yeah, you're mad. And so whoever's at the front of the line, when it says the buck,
they're going down.
The buck stops here. Apparently, the ammunition round stops there too, and I don't agree with that at all, not in the least bit. But when people are that attached to a dog, and especially, if these dogs are like 13, 14 years old, sometimes they can sort of rationalize it that this dog was old, it got old, and it died of a condition. It probably just couldn't get rid of the copper anymore, blah, 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 blah. But when they send that dog food in and find out 60 parts per million, they want to have somebody castrated or something happen to them.
No, I completely get it.
Yep.
Well,
that was a really long answer, wasn't it?
That was a really long answer. Yeah. I do enjoy this segment, and I enjoy people tuning in and asking questions over email. Yep. If you have not asked a question over email, you can go onto our website, VoyagerDogFoodCo.com, and you could submit your email to our newsletter, and we will get emails to you saying if you have questions for Dr. Pete, send them in, and he first of all writes you a response over email. And then we answer them on the podcast to do like a longer one. So you're not waiting all week for the answer.
But then we usually give you a heads up as to when it's going to come out.
Exactly.
And occasionally I'll have our girl Celia go ahead and call people back and say he'd like to talk to you, because sometimes it's a complicated answer.
Yes.
And sometimes not only a complicated answer, but it's an incomplete history.
Right.
So if I can tell you, so I not only need to know how high your ALT is, I need to know how long you've been fighting a high ALT.
Yeah. Yep.
And these high ALTs, and here's kind of the way these happen is, and your dog was lucky.
Sage.
Yeah. No. Our question.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought you meant Sage was copper storage disease.
No. The person who asked
Anita's
the question.
dog.
Yeah, Anita's dog. Yeah. Anita was lucky. Her dog didn't have fibrosis of the liver.
Yeah.
So fibrosis of the liver is really similar to, in people, it's somebody who drinks a fifth of gin every night after when they come home from work. And 6 years later, they got fibrosis of the liver or cirrhosis. Mm-hmm. And cirrhosis, a real case of cirrhosis is not reversible.
Right.
The nice thing about her dog is this is probably all reversible. Mm-hmm. So once she gets rid of the copper, goes back on a regular food that doesn't have copper in it, they all live happily ever after.
Exactly.
Yep.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Pete, for joining us today. Yep. We'll get some outro music going.
Yeah, 12.5.
12.5. All right, guys, we sure appreciate you listening along with us today. We hope that we've been able to share some information that will help you love your animals as much as they love you. Don't forget, always treat the treatable, prevent the preventable, and we will catch you on the next one.
See you.